All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Draft Board. David and Tyson here with you. Hope you're enjoying March Madness, and I'm sure we're all very thankful that it's back after COVID changed the world right as the last one was supposed to take place. But Tyson, how do you feel about March Madness this year?
It's crazy. It's good to catch a few games. I'm not super into March Madness basketball, but you know the upsets are always enticing, and it's very interesting to see how players do and which teams move on in the tournament, and it's definitely surprising this year.
And I found that it's been one of those things that sometimes can get even non-sports fans engaging with it. Case in point, every year I don't know exactly how big it is, but dozens of people are in this one March Madness bracket challenge run by my good friend's dad, and it's titled The People versus Dan McIver. And it's been going on for, I think, at least 10 years, maybe significantly longer than that. I would have to ask him. And it's also funny because Dan McIver is hardly some sort of consistent champ like he says he is. It's just the running joke every year where he's like, hey guys, have fun fighting for second place. But as we all know, March Madness is mad. It's a great name for it, and it is an absolute crapshoot when it comes to a lot of upsets and turns of events that can happen. But before we start talking about that, you know, since we are going to be talking about madness a little bit today, I'd like to share with the people an incredible anecdote that I found on Instagram by chance a few weeks ago. Now, this dates back to August 5th, 2019, and it concerns former Ohio basketball player DJ Cooper, 30 years of age, and at that point in time, he was hit with a 2-year suspension by FIBA after failing a drug test. Now, Tyson, why don't you take a guess at why he got popped?
Usually when a player fails a drug test, it's because of either performance-enhancing drugs like steroids or testosterone enhancers, or they were doing some recreational drug like heroin or cocaine.
And turns out, Tyson, the answer to the question is D, none of the above.
What?
Because DJ Cooper's drug test revealed that he was pregnant. Pregnant. Am I enunciating clearly? Yeah, that is the case, folks. His drug test showed that he was pregnant, and now, since we're not BuzzFeed, we're not going to leave you there. We're actually going to tell you what happened. So, Tyson, the truth is, DJ Cooper tried to use his pregnant girlfriend's urine to pass this drug test.
Oh no!
And tested positive for a substance called HCG. I'm not going to try to pronounce the full name of that substance because I could be confident about it, but it's probably going to be very wrong. But yes, he tested positive for HCG, which is produced by women during pregnancy by the placenta. And they found this out, and essentially they banned him for 2 years for trying to evade the drug test that way, and his ban runs through June 24th of this year. Wow.
So, note to self, if you're going to try and sneak away through a drug test, don't use your girlfriend's urine, who is also pregnant, because they will find that out.
Right, I mean, at the very least, he could have, you know, I don't understand what was running through this man's mind. It's like, okay, it's one thing to use your girlfriend's urine, it's one thing, but it's another thing to use your pregnant girlfriend's urine. Like, that's just...
I'm sure the hormones and imbalances were just way off and super weird.
Yeah, it's, I mean...
Way to draw attention to yourself.
He last played with a team in Monaco in 2017. But anyways, now that we have that insanity out of the way, we're going to move on to our actual customary feel-good. Or actually, no, before we do that, I'm just going to give everyone a quick update on how we're doing in terms of streaming numbers-wise. We have superseded ESPN in total views. Just kidding. But no,
we're almost there.
We've almost beat First Take. No, we haven't. But we are up to 34 listeners and a total of 15 followers on Spotify. And our last episode, Change of Pace, so far has drawn 15 streams and 11 listeners. And again, honestly, at this point, double digits is kind of our benchmark. So, guys, whoever's been out there listening, we really, really appreciate you as always. And of course, if you're following us but you haven't had a chance to get around to episode 2 yet, that is totally fine.
Yeah, no, it's super great to be able to do this, and we love talking about sports, and we're happy that you're able to listen in on our conversation, and we hope that we keep giving you good stuff to listen to.
And speaking of good stuff now, Tyson, we're going to get into our feel-good story of the day. Why don't you introduce to the people to an amazing lady named Jean Dolores Schmidt?
Yes, otherwise known as Sister Jean, who is the chaplain for the men's basketball Loyola Ramblers. So Sister Jean, she is, like I said, the chaplain of the team, and she is 101 years old, David.
Born in 1919.
Ooh.
August 21st, 1919. She's almost lived through both World Wars.
Almost. She's lived through the Depression and definitely World War II. She played basketball in high school. She went and got a degree in from Loyola as well. She was very active in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And she loves basketball, and it's super great to see these young men really come around Sister Jean and be able to really kind of feed off of that wisdom and that energy, and they call her their secret weapon, and it's super great to see Sister Jean really lead by example and show these guys how to live right. And prior to defeating the number 1 seed Illinois in the NCAA tournament this year, she incorporated a scouting report into the team's pre-game prayer about some shooting percentages and rebounding. So, needless to say, Sister Jean, she's one of a kind. She kind of rose to prominence when Loyola went on that run in 2017, I believe, where they made it to the Final Four. She became very kind of popular and well-known, and she's been a figure of Loyola basketball ever since.
Actually, I think that was 2018.
Oh, it was 2018?
So they upset Miami, then Tennessee, and ultimately were defeated by Michigan. I believe it was 2018.
2018, but they made it to the Final Four. Yeah. And that was quite a run for Loyola, and they're hoping for another deep run this year.
And you know what, Tyson? They are off to a very good start. Now, their first round game wasn't too special. They were an 8th seed going up against the 9th-seeded Georgia Tech team, whom they defeated 71-16. You go, okay, very, very close in terms of seeding there, but as you know, if you've watched any March Madness, seeding can be pretty whack when it comes to this sort of thing, and we saw that in Loyola's case when they moved on to the next. They proceeded to dismantle number 1 ranked Illinois, like you said, 71-58. Wow.
Yeah. No, it's super interesting to see how these smaller schools do against bigger schools. Like, Illinois is in a Big Ten conference. They're definitely a powerhouse school, even though they're maybe not the traditional powerhouses like they are in football, but they definitely do better in basketball than they do in football. So, those big conferences oftentimes have big schools that get a lot of notoriety. And, like this year, Kentucky and Duke both didn't make the tournament for various reasons. So it's really interesting to see these smaller schools from smaller conferences get a chance, and they have very experienced players, and they're able to put up what they can do against the best players in the country on some of the bigger schools, and they're able to prove that they can also play basketball.
And I mean, speaking of these upsets, how about we're just gonna run through a few of them for you folks. Oregon State, number 12, taking out the Tennessee Volunteers, the number 5 seed, 70-56 in the first round. And then, of course, we have Oral Roberts. Now, raise your hand if you picked Oral Roberts to make it anywhere out of the first round. This is a podcast, so you can't see us, but our hands are both very solidly down. and not only that, right? They take number 2 seeded Ohio State, the Buckeyes. And they take them out 75-72, and it's one of those things where you kind of learn to expect the unexpected with March Madness, and this was a great example of that. Now, if you were a salty Buckeyes fan, you're like, you know what, that was a fluke. Somebody else is going to stop them cold in the next round. Nope, they proceed to take out number 7 Florida in the second round, and they've made it to a Sweet 16. Not bad for a private evangelical university.
For sure, yeah. Like Ohio State was favored by many to be in the national championship game or even to win it. There were quite a few ESPN analysts that had Ohio State winning the whole thing. and they were gone in round 1. And I know that for one particular Vegas bettor, they had bet $100,000 for Ohio State to win it all.
This is why you don't gamble, ladies and gentlemen. My goodness.
I mean, maybe this person was thinking, oh, once Ohio State wins a couple rounds, gets some momentum, and they beat up on some lower-ranked teams, they'll sell the bet back to the organization or to a third party or whatever and make a little bit of money off of this. But, yeah, no, it's gone now.
That's the Lord saying, you want to spend your money that way? Go ahead, son, see what happens.
It reminds me of this one analogy on a TV show, and it was, great, now I can go and place bets on college basketball. And it was the main character going up and said, here's $20,000. And then the cashier was like, would you like to place a bet, sir? And he's like, nope, just take it.
What show is this?
It was Family Guy.
Oh, Family Guy. Classic. Yikes. It sounds like something that would be on Family Guy.
Nope, just take it.
Just take it. And honestly, anyone who bet on third-seeded West Virginia are probably feeling the same way, because they fell to 11th-ranked, or rather 11th-seeded Syracuse in the second round, 75-72 on Sunday, which leads us to very interesting Sweet 16, wouldn't you say, Tyson? You've got 12th-ranked Oregon State and 8th-ranked Loyola, which at this point, it's kind of that underdog matchup that at this point people probably realize they're maybe not underdogs anymore.
Yeah.
And it's kind of whose mojo is going to keep going, and I'm, certainly I'm sure Loyola fans are hoping that Sister Jean can continue to help propel them on. 15th ranked Oral Roberts is now dealing with number 3 Arkansas, and I mean those Razorbacks they might be sweating a little bit after seeing what Oral Roberts did to their previous 2 opponents. But then of course Syracuse is going to play second-seeded Houston this Saturday as well. Of course, Tyson, that does leave some of our more traditional favorites. Gonzaga is still alive, and they're taking on number 5 Creighton as a 1 seed on Sunday. And, Pastor Brennan Dick, we've given you a shout out on this podcast before. We know your wife loves the Bulldogs, and I know a couple people who love the Bulldogs too, so hopefully they can avoid falling victim in the Sweet 16. Personally, I picked the Michigan Wolverines, another 1 seed, to win it all in my bracket, although, to be perfectly frank, that was more based on the fact that I love Wolverines as a team name, and I feel sorry for what their football team did this last season.
You like the name, not the team.
You know what? I also like the fact that with the stadium that can seat roughly 120,000, they have the biggest stadium in the United States. The Big House is a place that honestly, for a few years, I've wanted to go watch some football there. That's definitely a bucket list item, and thankfully it is a bucket list item, because COVID means I'm not going to get in a stadium with 119,000 anytime soon, but that's okay. We've got Michigan taking on 4th-ranked Florida State. I forget if I mentioned this before, but Syracuse is playing Houston, 2nd seed. I think I did mention that before. 11th-seeded UCLA is one we haven't talked about before, and they are facing number 2 Alabama in the Sweet 16 as well. And this is my opportunity to say Roll Tide, because I am a highly, highly bandwagon Alabama Crimson Tide fan, again because of the name and because I think Roll Tide is one of the coolest things that you could possibly say as a human being, not because I'm necessarily in love with the team.
I'm not a big fan of Bama. I don't like Nick Saban and the football team, but you can't deny that they're good this year, and their football program is definitely good. Big shout out to the Pac-12 conference, a conference that is on the West Coast, usually doesn't get a lot of notoriety. UCLA, Oregon State, Oregon, USC, they are all in the Sweet 16, and they're all from the Pac-12. That's really good representation from that conference.
I'm sorry, jog my memory. Is Ohio State a Pac? No. Those aren't Pac-12.
Sorry, Oregon
teams,
State.
Oregon State.
Oregon State.
Okay, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I don't know my college conferences as well as I maybe should at this point, but, we're learning. It's just that I heard, it's a different conference, I think, but I heard a meme, again, because memes are great, right?
Memes are great.
if people don't know, supporters of the Ohio State Buckeyes say this very strange, obnoxious thing where they don't just let you call them Ohio State University. They have to say, no, it is the Ohio State University. And I saw a meme that basically turned that on its head and went, the Ohio University. Because Ohio made it further than Ohio State.
Ooh. Yeah, that's tough because Ohio is definitely a much smaller school than Ohio State, and their athletic program is not nearly as developed as Ohio State's is. But it's really interesting and good to see the smaller schools kind of get through and make those upsets. So
absolutely. And then, of course, rounding out our quick rundown of the Sweet 16 coming at you this weekend, number 1 Baylor takes on number 5 Villanova, and number 6 USC takes on number 7 Oregon in what on paper is another very evenly matched bout. So I'm sure all you college basketball fans out there are looking forward to this.
Yeah, it'll be exciting, and it'll be definitely not what we expect because it never is.
No. And you know what? Speaking of another upset, I would actually like to throw it to the women's side of the NCAA tournament that has gotten underway, because now having become an IUPUI Jaguar, I have to support the Horizon League. It's a Midwestern mid-major conference containing IUPUI, Cleveland, Wright State, Green Bay, Northern Kentucky, and a number of other schools like that. Now, a shout out to the IUPUI Lady Jags women's basketball team. They made it all the way to the Horizon League championship game for the second year in a row. Unfortunately, last year they won it all. Tyson, they won it all. They took out the Green Bay Phoenix 51-37 on home court. And the Green Bay Phoenix are essentially the New England Patriots of the women's Horizon League basketball scene based on how much they win. And then, unfortunately, COVID victimized my friends on the Lady Jags, as well as many, many other athletes by canceling March Madness and changing life as we know it, right? Now this year, IUPUI, unfortunately, you know what, my team, I love them, and you know what, it was a tough loss, but they ended up falling to the Wright State Raiders by a score of 53-41. But why am I bringing this up, Tyson? Am I doing it just to commiserate? No, because frankly, I'm not that petty, and Wright State is a great team. So great, in fact, that as a 13 seed, they knocked off number 4 Arkansas 66-62 yesterday. And so I'm giving them a shout-out for representing the Horizon League as well as they have been.
Yeah, it's good to see those smaller schools, again, get those representations in the women's side of things. You know, you got the big powerhouses like University of Connecticut is a major powerhouse in the women's basketball side of things. Same thing with Stanford. Their coach has been there for a long time. Very successful career. It's really good to have those smaller schools get themselves into the tournament and make memories for life. And it was sad that it didn't happen last year because so many of those memories were taken away because of COVID for so many players and so many teams. But it's good to see that we're back this year.
For sure. And speaking of back or coming back, how about Lonzo Ball's jump shot? It's back, certainly, isn't it? I mean, this guy. Well, before we get started on this, Tyson, I just want to address sort of the elephant in the room for a lot of casual basketball viewers who say that was an uncontested jump shot. Why didn't he make that? And now, I mean, the answer is multifaceted because obviously that hoop, you know, you go to any gym, hoops are not that big, and even the professionals can have a tough time consistently making shots, especially from three-point range, because, you know, the margins of error can be smaller than you think, right? Especially if it's even a little bit contested, or especially if it's properly contested. Having said that, there are also players who, let's say, are decidedly better at jump shooting than others, and Lonzo Ball used to be an example of this in the negative.
Yeah, Lonzo Ball was absolutely awful at shooting the basketball for his rookie year. Just some stats from year by year stats wise. Lonzo shot 35% from the field, 30.5% from three, and 45% on his free throws.
Free throws under 50?
Yes, under 50% on his free throws.
My goodness.
There's nobody contesting him. It's just him in the hoop, and it's all concentration and form, and he only got 45%.
My gosh. I don't know what's more impressive, the fact that he was that bad at this one particular skill, or the fact that same year he still managed to shoot 30% from three.
Yeah, so, well, he was kind of a good three-point shooter in college. Like, he was really streaky for UCLA when he played there in college, when he went that 1 year in college. But he, unfortunately, that streakiness of his shooting didn't translate to the NBA very well. So the next year, in year two, he improved on his percentages from the field. He shot 40% from the field. He actually shot 33% from three, which is
that's good.
That's okay, But again, he was 41% from free throws. 41% on free throws his second year.
I don't know what's worse, that or Aaron Baines is 42% on layups.
I don't know. They're both pretty terrible. And then Lonzo Ball was famously part of the package that was for that Anthony Davis trade.
Right, it was the package that the Los Angeles Lakers sent to the Pelicans in order to get Davis a key part of their last championship run.
Yep.
And, of course, Lonzo is now in New Orleans.
So now that Lonzo Ball isn't playing with LeBron, he doesn't have these expectations, he can kind of be developed a little bit more.
A little bit further from LeBron and his father as well.
Exactly, and we saw some improvements. Again, he shot 40% from the field. He had 37.5% from three, and he got up to 56.6% on free throws.
So congratulations, it's barely a pass.
It's barely a pass on free throws, but 37.5% on threes, that's pretty good. That's about, kind of where you would expect him to be for a smaller guard. 40% from the field. You'd like to see that a little bit higher. And now this year, his most recent year that we're in right now with the Pelicans, Lonzo Ball is shooting 42.5% from the field, 38.5% from three, and he's shooting 76.7% on free throws. He has made considerable strides in his ability to shoot the ball over the course of 4 years. He's improved 7.5% from the field, 8% from free throws, and he's improved more than 30% on foul shots since year one. And those small percentages make huge impacts over the course of the year. As more shots start to go in, he starts getting more confidence, and he starts playing more minutes. And because he can hit free throws somewhat consistently now, the coach can trust him out at the end of the game to make those free throws, maybe when he's getting fouled.
And as someone who has watched a few New Orleans Pelicans games in the last month or so, I can certainly say that he's passed the eye test in the ways that you described. He is a knockdown shooter, especially from three. He's had games where he has gotten very, very hot from beyond the arc and has been knocking them down, contested or not. He's pulling up for early long shots, early in the shot clock, and he is actually making it. And, I can't help but wonder if, actually, this almost certainly has something to do with it because, Ball is a guy that used to have this weird unorthodox jump shot in which he was drifting to his left and launching. And it was very, very unusual. And now his form is much more conventional, which almost certainly has something to do with his improvement as well as just the work he's put in.
Yeah, the work that he's put in to change his form to a more consistent form has definitely helped improve his shooting percentages, and that's something that definitely has been worked on, and it's been a focus of his game for the last few years, and it's why he's been able to get to this point where he's now a threat to score, because his rookie year with the Los Angeles Lakers, he wasn't a threat to score when he was on the basketball court. You could basically have 5 guys guarding 4 players because, he wasn't a threat to score, he wasn't a threat to shoot. He's not particularly athletic in his style that he's able to kind of blow by guys and get to the basket particularly consistently. So Lonzo Ball, when having the ball in his hands for his rookie year, he was essentially only a passer, and that's really all he could do really well. So now that he's added this other dimension to his game, he's able to be a more effective point guard because people have to actually guard him at the 3-point line, because if they don't, Lonzo Ball can make him pay.
And certainly the Pelicans are happy that he's making strides in this direction. You know what? They're a young team. They're still under 500 right now, 19-24. Although they did take out the LeBron-less Los Angeles Lakers, 128-111, earlier today. And, with a guy like Zion Williamson murdering rims at will, and with a guy like Steven Adams as a rock-solid piece of granite in the middle, and Brandon Ingram, a mid-range maestro. They've got talent on this team, and hopefully in the next couple of years they can really put it together in the post-Anthony Davis era and make something of themselves. Now, speaking of jump shooting and players that don't really do it so well, we're going to talk about Ben Simmons. Now, if you don't follow the Philadelphia 76ers or you don't follow basketball, Ben Simmons he's a bizarre specimen. He's born in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, so he's an Australian-American player, the third Melbourne-born number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft following Andrew Bogut and Kyrie Irving. I did not know Kyrie Irving was born there.
Really? Wow.
Either the internet's lying to me or, you know what, it could be, right? But anyways, I digress. Tyson, how many 6'10", 6'11" point guards exist in the NBA, or at all?
Currently, one, Ben Simmons.
Right. So Ben Simmons has the body of a small forward, power forward, and he plays point guard, which if you know like two things about basketball, you look at sort of the roster sheet and you go, it's a little bit unusual. Like, it's actually a lot unusual. And you know what you can say about the guy is he's 3-time NBA All-Star. Last year, he was an All-NBA defensive first team. Like Zion Williamson, he has kind of a penchant for murdering the rim, although not to the extent of Zion. He is a good passer, very, very athletic, can jump out of the building. But frankly, Tyson, the only thing that's more strange and anomalous than a 6'11" point guard is a 6'11" point guard who doesn't have a jump shot barely at all.
Yeah, this one is weird. So Ben Simmons, like you said, he's 6'10", so he's definitely got great size. He plays the point guard position, and he's been playing the point guard position his entire life, so he knows how to play it. But Ben Simmons, he's had 5 NBA seasons in his career, but he missed the first season due to an injury, so essentially 4 years of playing time. And in those 4 years, Ben Simmons has attempted, for a total of 32 career three-point shots.
Wait, sorry, in 5 seasons?
In 5 seasons.
My goodness.
He's attempted 32 total shots from the three-point line or beyond.
In this era of basketball.
In this era of basketball. The more concerning part is that he's only made 5.
Say that again.
He is 5 for 32 on three-point shots.
So he's made an average of 1 3 a season.
Yeah.
My goodness. Wow.
He's shooting, we don't have much of a sample size here, but he's only shooting 15.6% on threes.
That's, you know what? That's, first of all,
that's half of what Lonzo shot in his rookie year.
I'm almost speechless, as you folks can tell right now. That is, to make it into the NBA. Listen, all due respect to Ben Simmons, he's an athletic player and he's got skills in other areas, but first of all, to make it into the NBA as a non-center, and especially in this era of the NBA where centers are expected to shoot some threes, the three ball is more important than ever. It's so important that the Houston Rockets tried to win an NBA championship last year, starting 6'5" PJ Tucker at center. That's how important long-range shooting is these days, and the Golden State Warriors obviously made that fashionable. But to have made 5 threes in your entire career, in your 5th year in the league, is frankly unacceptable. And I'm sure you would agree, especially given the fact that you take a guy like Lonzo Ball, and he's proof that if you work on your shot, you can be a very poor shooter and get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ben Simmons, the problem is that he's not even trying to get better at this point. You can see by his shooting percentage. For free throws, there's marginal improvement year to year, but from shooting percentage from long distance and long range, really there's essentially been no improvement. Ben Simmons has shot 388 shots this season. And of those 388 shots, Ben Simmons has, what was the number? He dunked or layups on 64% of those shots.
Wow.
64% are either dunks or layups. That's so much of his usage. For another stat, Ben Simmons, he's only shot 53 shots from further than 8 feet away.
Wow. That's not as far as you might think.
No, so for reference, the foul line is around 15 feet away from the basket. So go halfway between the foul line and the basket, and that's the distance that Ben Simmons is shooting some shots at. And of those 53 shots, he's only made 21. That's 39% from beyond 8 feet.
Like, that's, to me, is an absolutely bizarre fact. And, you know, like, if there's going to be players in the league that like that, you expect them to be like Shaquille O'Neal, right? Someone who just makes a living dominating the paint old school as a center, but as we know, obviously, Ben Simmons is a point guard. And you know what? It's just crazy to me that at this point, teams don't just, like, every single time that Ben Simmons gets the ball on the wing or at the top of the key, they don't just collapse off him like it's a video game and be like, shoot it, we dare you.
Yeah, and he won't shoot it because he doesn't feel comfortable with the jump shot, or he doesn't believe that he can make those shots. He just, for whatever reason, doesn't even try and shoot. He doesn't even attempt to make, you know, long distance shots or stretch the court or even bring his defender closer towards him with maybe a pump fake, so that way he can maybe have that advantage with a closer defender to go around him. He doesn't try and do that either. He's essentially only using his athleticism to get to the rim and either get a dunk or a layup or make a pass.
That's, you know what, it's something that if he doesn't work on this in his game, I fear might just become part of his legacy as an athlete. And you know, maybe it is already. Time will tell, but you know, frankly, it's maddening.
It is, and we're possibly coming to the time where this is just what Ben Simmons is. Now, I'm not saying that Ben Simmons can't improve, because I'm sure he can, and I'm sure that if he puts his mindset to it and he takes the time in the off season and it puts in the work during the season as well, that he can take significant strides to become a formidable shooter from range. Another example that I have is Russell Westbrook, who kind of plays that same style.
And is also a very polarizing player in his own right.
Very polarizing player in his own right, but Russell Westbrook is significantly smaller, so he kind of has to play with that high energy. But Russell Westbrook still takes open threes. He still takes open jump shots.
Like, he's not a great jump shooter by any means, but at least he tries and hits them at an okay clip.
And it forces the defender to at least somewhat respect his jump shot. At this point, Ben Simmons, you could be standing at the three-point line, and there's absolutely no reason to guard him out there.
You know, if I magically was teleported into the brain of an NBA head coach during a game against the 76ers, I wouldn't know what I'd be doing out there, but the one thing that I would know to do is to tell my players, if you close out on Ben Simmons, I will bench you.
That's essentially all you need to do, is make sure that Ben Simmons doesn't get to the rim, which he's incredibly talented and incredibly gifted.
For sure.
Because all of these coaches know this, but yet he's still able to get to the rim and still able to put up 14 points a game, which is very good in the NBA, especially as a point guard who also gets a lot of assists. But Ben Simmons, you got to learn how to shoot, man.
You know what? Yeah, I think he got it, and I'm fairly sure that many people in his life have told him that. But you know what? We can't comment too much on his personal life, and obviously only time will tell what kind of an athlete he develops into and ends up being in the NBA. Mm-hmm. And now, folks, in order to transition out of basketball, we unfortunately have to say goodbye to an NBA Hall of Famer, and that's Elgin Baylor, who passed away on the 22nd of March at the age of 86.
Yeah, Elgin Baylor, he is oftentimes overlooked because he was on some of those really, really good Laker teams. He was on the Jazz as a coach, and he is sometimes overlooked, and he was definitely an exceptional player, and he was an 11-time NBA All-Star. He was an NBA All-Star MVP. This man definitely has a ton of credentials to his name, and he is a basketball icon, and he definitely will be missed.
And I like what you said about him being rather overlooked, because that was certainly the case for me. Now, granted, folks, full disclosure, I've only been a basketball fan for 3 years, so I am playing catch up big time on a lot of things, both as a fan and as a sports journalist, and I will admit that readily, but Elgin Baylor is a name that I didn't even come close to hearing, right? It's not even, like, obviously he's not a LeBron James, he wasn't a Michael Jordan, he didn't have that kind of notoriety, he didn't even have notoriety like a Jeremy Lin, right? Who was this sensation, but you know what, I didn't know who Elgin Baylor was until last year when I read a book for one of my classes in the IUPUI Sports Capital Journalism program called Basketball: A Love Story. Now, I do have to say, if you care about basketball at all, you need to read this book. It is an oral history of the sport of basketball, compiled from hundreds of interviews, compiled by the likes of Dan Flores, Jackie McMullen, and Rafe Bartholomew. And it is a highly intriguing read based primarily even on anecdotes, on the players' words and on coaches' words, on on commissioners, and this was where I learned who Elgin Baylor was, and I learned that despite the fact that I had never heard of him, he was like you said, a multiple-time All-Star, exceptional player, a fixture on a lot of those Lakers teams, and the basketball world will miss him for sure.
Yeah, he definitely will. He was overlooked a little bit because he played with Jerry West, and if you know Jerry West, he's the NBA logo, and
he is the guy. He is the silhouette on the logo that billions of people just take for granted.
Right, and he played in the same time frame and in the same era as Wilt Chamberlain, and I believe Bill Russell a little bit as well. So, kind of like those guys are oftentimes looked as NBA legends, but we don't think of Elgin Baylor in that same category, and it's sad because I think we should, and he was definitely a great basketball player and a great man, and he'll be missed.
Absolutely. Now, folks, let's transition to an update on the NFL team that Tyson and I both agree on, the Green Bay Packers. And one of the things that happened with them in recent history is that they lost the NFC Championship to Brady, who won his 7th, and we're tad salty about that, but I'm over it.
I'm not.
Okay. Anyways, with that aside, back on the 14th of March, Aaron Jones has signed a 4-year, $48 million extension to stay in Green Bay after they declined to franchise tag him. And so I know that you thought that Jones was on his way out, but it turns out they were expecting bigger offers in free agency. His agent went and said that, but apparently those didn't come, and looks like Aaron Jones decided that he would rather stay in Green Bay then. So anyways, like I said, 4 years, $48 million, with $13 million of those dollars guaranteed, and a $13 million signing bonus on top of that. Not exactly what Dak Prescott is getting paid, but to be perfectly honest, it's kind of nice to take a break from these massive, gaudy contracts like that. I mean, he's a running back, he's getting paid very, very handsomely. Now, Aaron Jones obviously is an established playmaker. He has rushed for over 1,000 yards and added over 350 yards through the air in each of the last 2 seasons, accounting for 35 total touchdowns in his previous 34 games. Now that is none too shabby, and he also improved as a pass blocker on third downs last year en route to his first Pro Bowl. Now, some fans might still be nonplussed with Jones's performance in said NFC Championship earlier this year.
Yeah.
6 rushes, 27 yards. 4 catches for 7 yards, and 2 fumbles, 1 lost. Is not a good look in a game that big, but obviously everyone falters every now and then. Everyone's human, and barring the unexpected, Jones should remain at least a top 10 running back with skills in every department of his position.
Yeah, I believe so. Again, it's tough to go back and remember those 2 fumbles, particularly the one that he lost in that NFC Championship game. But, you laid out all the stats for Aaron Jones. His production has been incredible, especially for, that offense. He seems to fit very well in that backfield with Aaron Rodgers. And, in the NFL, the way it is right now, you need a running back that at least has some skills coming out of the backfield receiving the ball. And Aaron Jones has shown that he is more than formidable in doing that. So, he can catch the ball. He's a red zone threat. He can break off big runs. He's definitely got a lot of talent.
And he's got surprising power for a 5'9" running back. He is not the biggest guy, but he's very compact with excellent balance, and we have both seen him break some tackles and grind out extra yards too.
Yeah, for sure. His ability, like his low center of gravity, definitely helps break tackles. And Aaron Jones is a very good back, and he was going to get paid. Like you said, he definitely didn't expect the offers to be kind of as low as maybe they were expecting to be.
Low is a relative term.
Low is definitely a relative term. But Aaron Jones, he could have taken more money to go elsewhere, but he took a little bit of a pay cut because, let's face it, this works really well. Let's not ruin it for Aaron. Let's not ruin it for the Packers.
For sure. Now, obviously, that does leave an odd man out of the backfield in relation to last year, and that man ended up being Jamaal Williams, who was drafted in 2017, the same year as Jones. Ironically, Jamaal was drafted in round 4, Aaron was drafted in round 5, but it's funny how sports work sometimes. Jamaal Williams became Aaron Jones' backup in Green Bay, but he was still a very solid number 2 running back, contributing at least 460 yards on the ground and 210 yards receiving in each of his 4 seasons. That's very good if you're a committee guy. He's got great energy. If you've watched Packers games, you've probably seen him dancing on the sideline. Everyone who knows him says he's a great figure to have around in the locker room. Tough runner, powerful runner, like I said, receiving aptitude. But he has, interestingly enough, signed with the NFC North rival Detroit Lions in free agency.
Yeah, Pat McAfee had Aaron Rodgers on his show during the season, and Aaron Rodgers frequently said Jamaal Williams is a big part of our offense this year. He's going to be a focal point, and he's going to really help us open some things up for us in the passing game. And it may not look like it by his stats and by his yards, but because of how our offense is going to be used with kind of multiple running backs, Jamaal Williams was going to be a big part of that. And I think we saw that. And, Jamaal Williams, granted, he's not as talented as Aaron Jones, but he's definitely got a lot of talent. He's got a lot of skill. He's a power back who can come out of the backfield and catch it too. And he is kind of that Swiss Army knife guy that we had in our backfield for a long time. And when Aaron Jones was missing time with injury, Jamaal Williams stepped in very well.
For sure, but now that Jamaal Williams is gone, the number 2 spot in the Packers backfield goes, of course, we're swapping a Swiss Army knife for a battering ram. A.J. Dillon, the second-year man out of Boston College, and frankly, folks, I'm going to go ahead and out myself as a measurables addict. And
you love it.
I love it, and here's why I love it. 6 feet tall, 247 pounds. Translation for the non-football fans out there, that's big, that's solid, that's thick with like 3 C's, if I'm being honest. And listen, man, that's the truth. I mean, A.J. Dillon is a Mack truck, but he's a fast truck, too. He ran his 40-yard dash in 4.53 seconds, which, again, the reference point is that is where we start to get sort of your slower wide receivers, your slower cornerbacks, your slower safeties. Players that are 40, 50 pounds lighter than Dillon can run in that range. He's also got a 41-inch vertical, which, again, like anything near 40 inches is a very, very solid vertical. And this guy has got power in his lower body for days. Very, very accomplished at Boston College. And again, I've just thrown a bunch of numbers at y'all. And like we just said before, someone like me, like the frank truth is, I'm 5'3". I've never been athletic, and that is the reason why the measurables catch my eye in particular. I go, wow, someone who's that big, that strong, that fast, that explosive. I wish I was like remotely like that, but I'm not. Rip. And obviously, even if you're not exactly like me, you would expect a guy like that to be a very successful professional athlete due to his physical traits. Having said that, A.J. Dillon was drafted in the 2nd round, 62nd overall last year. And Tyson, you're not the biggest fan of that.
Yeah, so A.J. Dillon, he kind of broke the internet in training camp when he got to the Packers because they were all running around in shorts because it wasn't quite time for the pads and the pants and stuff like that. And this guy had some massive quads
Oh, for sure.
and massive legs, and you could just go and look and go, man, that's thick. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
But again, like you said, I wasn't a big fan of the draft that, A.J. Dillon was in, partially because of the guy we took in the first round.
You know what? No. Save that for later, man. We gotta not spoil it too
I know,
early.
but
Spoil it.
So here's my problem. Okay, is you had Aaron Jones, you had Jamal Williams, and then you went and you drafted A.J. Dillon. Okay, why did you do that? Why are you drafting a player that you don't necessarily need and is going to be pushed down on your depth chart?
Sure.
You knew and understood that Jamal Williams was going to be a big part of this offense. You understood and knew that Aaron Jones was going to be the feature back because he was last year and he had an exceptional year, and he probably should have made the Pro Bowl 2 years in a row based off of his numbers, but unfortunately he just didn't get the voting 2 years ago. So why would you spend a second-round draft pick on a running back who's going to be your third guy? It doesn't make sense to me. I think that there were other places, other needs that the team could have addressed in the draft in the second round, and I think that there were some players that were available that would have made a lot more sense.
And you know what? I think that is a fair argument in a lot of ways because, well, a few reasons. First of all, you look at backs of Jones's caliber and Williams' caliber, and we already told you they were drafted in the 4th and 5th rounds.
Much later.
And there was reason to believe that Dillon may still have been available in those later rounds where the draft capital you're expending to get him was less valuable, and that's certainly a fair point.
Right, like round 3, could you have gotten A.J. Dillon? Maybe. Maybe not, but maybe. But if A.J. Dillon goes in the 3rd round and you're not able to get him, then the next best running back you could also probably get in the 5th round. There are the running back position in college is so deep, and there are so many good running backs that are coming out of these university and college programs year after year after year that you can find one in the late rounds that are undrafted. Like Jacksonville, they had James Robinson, ran for over 1,000 yards. He was undrafted. Right? So you can find guys in the later rounds and after not being drafted. Philip Lindsay had a 1,000-yard season a couple of years ago for the Broncos as well.
Yes, for sure.
And, so these guys pop out every year who are undrafted or late picks, and they have great seasons, and they can become a feature back in the offense, that it doesn't make sense to go out and get a running back in round 2 when there are maybe possibly better options later on that you just don't quite understand and quite see because they're from a smaller school.
And the other argument is that the NFL is a passing league now more than ever, where the emphasis has gone towards multiple receiver sets, move tight ends, stretching the field, and because of that, the run game, although obviously very, very useful, it's something that is more of a complementary role, which, as you said, your third string running back is not going to be a horribly impactful player, and Dillon's 242 yards last year is about as much as something you would expect for that position. But in his defense, 124 of those yards came in one game, which is not great for some reasons, but 124 yards, 2 touchdowns in Week 16 against the Tennessee Titans last December. We both watched this game. Dillon, that was a game, I think that defined his rookie season. He was breaking tackles, powering through contact, converting your 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s with regularity that game, in the snowy tundra that night. He's flashed his potential, and one of the things that really did impress me about his college record is that he is not just a pound it between the tackles guy. Like, he does have the ability to run to the outside. He's got a very good burst for someone his size, and he's got great size to pass block, although he needs to work on his footwork. But, either way, he is the number 2 back now, or at least he darn well should be. And, I love a good run game. I love a freakish athlete like that guy, and I am definitely a bit more optimistic about what he can do than maybe you. I think that with an increased workload, he could be a great complement to Jones, kind of have that stereotypical thunder and lightning backfield, or at least that's what Packers fans hope for. But I will concede the point that perhaps his measurables, right,
Mm-hmm.
were the reason he was drafted so highly. And if he was a little slower, if he didn't jump quite as high, or he was a little bit smaller, he could have easily gone in the 4th, 5th, or 6th, or even 7th rounds. Now, having said that, he was not the most controversial pick Green Bay made last year, which we alluded to before, which brings us to some real madness. Tyson, take it away.
I'm getting a headache just thinking about it. Jordan Love was a quarterback out of Utah State who was drafted by the Green Bay Packers in the 1st round last year.
26th overall.
26th overall. And the Green Bay Packers not only drafted him in the 1st round, they traded up to get him.
From 30th to 26th, if memory serves.
So a little bit of they had to pay a little bit extra in draft compensation to go up and get him. So it's not like Jordan Love kind of fell to them in their pick and they were like, oh, he's the best guy available. We're gonna take him now because he's just the best guy on our board. That wasn't the case. There was a purpose behind this of we're going to trade an additional asset or 2 assets, I can't quite remember what the trade was, to trade up spots to get Jordan Love. And I'll give you credit, Jordan Love had a really good sophomore year, but Jordan Love was playing for Utah State in the Mountain West Conference, which...
A premier football conference in the United States. Just kidding.
No,
really.
it's more like a pillow fight conference.
Like,
there aren't any top 25 ranked teams in that conference. There aren't too many players that come out of the Midwest Conference that are, drafted at all. There definitely aren't any national championship favorites coming out of that conference. It's really tough to see that conference as kind of a pipeline for NFL talent. And I guess, there's a chance that, players come from where they can and, I don't know, Jordan, he chose Utah State. I'm not sure if he had any other options or not. But for whatever reason, he went to Utah State and he played. And I'll give him credit. He played well in his sophomore year. But, with Aaron Rodgers, who is a premier quarterback, he's going to go into the Hall of Fame. He's won Super Bowl for you. Why would you take a quarterback when you still have 4 years on your contract with Aaron Rodgers?
Now, I'm going to be the moderate in the room because, to be honest, I didn't hate the pick as much as a lot of Packers fans did. And, well, first of all, the reason why we're bringing this up is that Tim Boyle, Rodgers' backup for the last 3 years, has joined Jamal Williams in Detroit. Kind of an interesting coincidence there. He signed in the last few days after Green Bay decided not to extend him. Love is entrenched as the number 2 quarterback in the tundra, and that's why we're revisiting this topic. But here's the thing, Tyson. I think that before this season, nobody would have expected Aaron Rodgers to throw 48 touchdowns at the age that he is, 36, 37. He doesn't have a great many years left, and this is what I've been saying, honestly, to you since last year. Aaron Rodgers is not young anymore, and he has taken a ton of punishment over the course of his career, multiple major surgeries, the most recent of which was a broken collarbone. Like, frankly, I would have been happy with 30 touchdowns out of Rodgers and a step back. 30 touchdowns from him last year and a step back this year. Now, obviously, he showed us that under Matt LaFleur's scheme, he does have more than I anticipated. His third straight MVP, he accounted for 51 total touchdowns as, an absolute juggernaut on offense. Okay, but the thing is that no matter how you slice it, Aaron Rodgers doesn't have much left. I mean, optimistically, 2 years left of anywhere near this level, and I think that's about all you can ask for him. And if he ask from him, if he gets you more than that, I think that's great, but it's not necessarily going to happen. And so I am someone who believes in preparing for the future. And let's be real, the worst time to draft a quarterback is when you absolutely need one. That's why there are such bidding wars and drafting blunders over quarterbacks, right? Year after year after year. There's, no more than about 12, 15 good to great quarterbacks in the league at any one time. So, I don't hate the pick, but I certainly understand why there's cause for concern in Packerland.
Yeah, like there was a lot of. Here's my rebuttal: is that Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers under first-year head coach Matt LaFleur won 13 games. Now, Aaron Rodgers was very efficient, didn't throw many picks, but he also didn't throw very many touchdowns because
not by his standards.
Not by his standards, and that's something that we weren't necessarily used to or accustomed to. But second year in a head coach system is usually when good coaches and good systems make considerable strides. I think that's why a lot of people are expecting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady in year 2 to be a lot better than last year, because it took them 5, 6, 7 games for them to kind of hit their stride, and then obviously the rest is history.
They were utterly terrifying when they hit their stride.
Exactly. So what happened with Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur is that it took them a season to kind of figure it out, but they still won 13 games figuring it out. And then next year they win 13 games again, and Aaron Rodgers has this MVP season. It's not like this necessarily came out of nowhere. I didn't think that anybody would have expected Aaron Rodgers to win the MVP this year. I think that was a lofty expectation that nobody had. And I think that if you're saying, oh yeah, I predicted Aaron Rodgers to win the MVP.
Sure you did.
Sure you did, right? But I don't think that, like for me, I was expecting Aaron Rodgers to make improvements from that year, first year with Matt LaFleur. And, you said that we don't know how many more years that Rodgers has, and
especially with that injury history.
And it's good, and I'll give you that he has more injuries than Tom Brady does. But I don't see why Aaron Rodgers can't play at a very high level to the point where you can win Super Bowls until he's 40. I don't see why he couldn't do that. Now, granted, that's all about health, and that if he gets hurt, then we're going to start having a lot of problems, and that's when you might need a Jordan Love. But right now, I don't think that there's necessarily a need to draft Jordan Love. At least there wasn't last year. And like I said, there were definitely other needs that could have been filled with that draft pick.
For sure. And now before we talk about those other needs on which we are fairly in agreement, I just want to set the stage for our listeners for what Jordan Love might bring to the table, because let's not just talk in theoreticals here. Let's talk about what the man did. You alluded to his sophomore year at Utah State. He threw 32 touchdowns against 6 interceptions in 2018. You know what? Might not have been the toughest conference, but those are good numbers. Mm-hmm. His junior year was when things started to fall apart, obviously. He threw 20 touchdowns and a full 17 interceptions, including 6 games with multiple picks. That's bad. It certainly is.
That's bad.
And I took a bit of a look at his college tape and his scouting report, and what it does show is plenty of arm strength, athleticism to move the chains, and you know what, even accuracy. There were times in his college career where Jordan Love ripped field side throws very deep and was able to hit his receiver, give his receiver a chance to catch a ball that was hard for the DB to make a play on. But of course his tape also shows some very erratic play and deficiencies in decision making in particular. I noticed, and some other journalists did as well, is that he tended to either miss or underestimate underneath defenders. And in that junior year, many of his picks were thrown to a linebacker sitting in the short middle of the field, which is that's not a disguised coverage, and it's cause for concern for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's concerning. And I'll give him credit for this. They had to switch coaches. And
an insane amount of turnover along that offense in his junior year as well.
Was there?
He was essentially playing with almost an entirely new slate of wide receivers that were sorely, sorely lacking in talent compared to the group he had in 2018. And frankly, when I looked at the tape, there were multiple plays where his receivers were dropping 50-yard bombs, would-be touchdowns, and they certainly failed to create separation and make plays in a way that he was used to in 2018. So when you combine that with the new head coach, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, because I noticed, after that really good year that Jordan had in his sophomore year, the head coach left for a job in Texas Tech. Now, Texas Tech, good program. They're a Power 5 school in the Big 12. That's kind of a good job, and I understand why a coach would want to leave, Jordan Love and Utah State and go live in Texas where there's no state tax, and you get to coach
and a lot of guns.
Yeah, and you also get to coach a team in a Power 5 conference. and that's definitely enticing, and you know, it's an upward move in a career.
Patrick Mahomes' school, I believe.
Exactly, right? So you can definitely get some quality talent there at Texas Tech. But when we look at the next year with all of this turnover and a new coach and probably a new staff as well, and pieces moving in and out, and that is very hard for any quarterback, and I think it showed in the tape.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyways, we're going to have to see what Jordan Love can do now that he is the number 2 quarterback. You know, Lord forbid if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, we might have to find out the hard way what he has in the tank. But, you know, it's something that, frankly, is up to chance. And I think that it's one of those draft picks that will be remembered in history as either brilliant or terrible. There's probably no middle ground.
Probably.
We'll see. Now, to sort of wrap up this section, we did allude to the Packers' positions of need, and in my opinion, that would be interior defensive line and inside linebacker, and I'm sure you would agree with that.
Yeah, I would. You know, the stopping the run was definitely a big cause for concern during stretches of the season this year.
And especially last year.
Yeah, like there was one game that was super windy at Lambeau Field, and the running back for the Minnesota Vikings, Dalvin Cook, very good running back.
He ran all over us.
4 touchdowns, 200 yards. That's the game.
I'm pretty sure Rodgers went 3 touchdowns, no picks, and we lost because of Dalvin Cook.
Right? Like, but we couldn't throw the ball very much because it was super windy. And, you know, Aaron Jones had a good game that game, but we couldn't stop the run and we couldn't stop Dalvin Cook, so we had to figure out new ways, and we just couldn't stop them, so we lost the game. And for a Green Bay Packers team that had 13 wins and 3 losses, you lost to a non-playoff team in your division because you couldn't stop the run.
Right, and obviously that starts with the interior defensive line because Kenny Clark is our only good/great interior lineman, and that's not enough in any scheme, but you know, in our 3-4 base defense. So if you don't understand what I'm talking about, there are 2 general ways you can set your defense. 3 defensive linemen and 4 linebackers behind them, or you can do a 4-3, which is a very traditional 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers in behind them. Now, granted, more and more teams are transitioning to a lot of sub packages, which essentially means subbing out linebackers for defensive backs. The nickel package, so named because there are 5 defensive backs on the field, is extremely common, and the Packers are no exception. Nonetheless, though, in a 3-4 style defense, even if you go sub package for that, those interior linemen, whether there's 3 of them or 2 of them, they need to hold their ground because much of your playmaking talent is in your linebacking core, and they need to be freed up for one-on-one pass rush matchups, or in the case of the inside guys, free-flowing to stop the run. Dean Lowry can't really do that. He's underwhelmed in his few seasons here. Kingsley Keke had 4 sacks last season, so perhaps some potential, but he's not really a sure thing. And so that is definitely a problem, because if those defensive linemen up front get overwhelmed, or if our opponents are able to double Kenny Clark all the time, which happened, or if Kenny Clark gets hurt, which he did, then we're in trouble. And frankly, as memory serves, we haven't had a truly good inside linebacker since A.J. Hawk's prime in the early 2010s, which is the other issue of need. Chris Barnes and Kamal Martin showed flashes last year, but are nonetheless young and injury prone.
Yeah, they're young and they're injury prone, and it's tough because there were a few years that they had to play Clay Matthews at inside linebacker because they were so desperate.
I remember those days. One of our best pass rushers, we had to play him inside.
Right, and you can do that sometimes, but you know, Clay Matthews said it best when he was talking to a reporter, and he said, "I like hitting quarterbacks, not fullbacks."
Yeah, and you know what? That's the kind of player as a 3-4 outside linebacker who's been a pass rusher his whole career. And like you said, that lack of depth at linebacker has created essentially personnel mismatches for the Packers. And now why don't we take a look back at the 2020 draft and see what we could have done to address these areas of need if we don't pick Jordan Love. Now, when I looked at the first round, I saw 2 premier defensive tackles, Derek Brown and Javon Kinlaw, both went into the top 15, well before the Packers had a shot at them, so scrub that, it wasn't going to happen. But when Green Bay traded up from 30th to 26th, they could have drafted a young inside linebacker such as Jordan Brooks, who went to Seattle, and Patrick Queen, who went to Minnesota. And both those guys ended up going after Jordan Love, 27 and 28, if memory serves. Patrick Queen in particular played for the national champion LSU Bayou Bengals, because I think that's a better name than Tigers, right? But LSU is, they've kind of been known for producing good linebackers in recent years. You got Quan Alexander, you've got Deion Jones in Atlanta, and of course Super Bowl champion Devin White, who I kind of see in my nightmares every once in a while, because that guy is a missile.
Yeah.
You can't help but think Patrick Queen, maybe a guy like that could have been a more impactful first-round pick.
Yeah, Patrick Queen, he looked a little bit out of his depth sometimes in playing in that middle linebacker position, but overall he was very good in some situations, and he was, definitely a position of need for us that we would have been definitely good to have that. And unfortunately, we went a different route, and Patrick Queen was taken 2 picks after we took Jordan Love, and Patrick Queen, I think that he was going to be a good pick, and he played really well at LSU. And, we're only 1 year removed from the draft. Let's not try and forget that.
No.
That, there's still a lot of life to be determined for these players. But, Patrick Queen, he looks really good. And there were some other players that were taken in the defensive end type stuff, like AJ Espinoza went to the Bills, and he came in and was kind of that really good defensive end in that 3-4 system for the Bills, and that's another pick that probably could have helped us on the defensive side of the ball.
For sure. Anyways, before we move on to our next segment, I do want to, and maybe I'm a little bit petty, but I do want to put something to bed. All of those other Packer fans screaming for us to draft at least 1 or 2 wide receivers to help Rodgers and play behind Davante Adams, because apparently going shotgun 5 wide is the only way to play football in the NFL. Just kidding, it's not. And we have already talked about how Aaron Rodgers clearly more than made it work with the weapons he did have available last year. Packers were the high scoring offense in the league, 31.8 points per game, and as well Matt LaFleur's use of play action and quick passes and a balance of run game was a part of that, because here's a fun advanced stat for you. Next gen stats are all the rage these days. Rodgers' average time to throw last year was 2.72 seconds, down from 2.88 in 2019 and 2.95 in 2018. Now again, to the layman that may not sound like a huge difference, but in football it is a difference between getting a throw off just in time and getting sacked, or getting your arm batted down, essentially. And so we can see that a more balanced offense and a more balanced use of the available weapons was certainly the key. So, you know what? Stop screaming wide receiver. That was, I get questioning Jordan Love, but that was not really the big problem.
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at the Packers draft and they go, oh, the Packers haven't taken a skill player in the draft in a long time, which is true. But they've also had exceptional drafts and developing players in late round talents. Like Aaron Jones went in the 5th round. Davante Adams was a 2nd round pick. Mm-hmm. They've been able to develop skill players from later on in the draft, and those skill players have now helped the Packers, and you haven't had to need to draft one of those guys in the 1st round. I think what everybody is concerned about is, what if Davante Adams goes down? Because he missed some time last year. And, when Davante Adams is healthy, it would be good to have that option too, to take some pressure off of Davante and maybe roll some coverage his way instead of Davante's way every single time.
Wait a second, you mean to tell me that Marquez Valdes-Scantling is not a credible threat?
Marquez Valdes-Scantling is either going to get you 77 yards and a touchdown,
or nothing,
or he's going to drop the 77 yards. And he's not going to get the touchdown. It's kind of one or the other with Marquez. And Allen Lazard, big-bodied receiver, but sometimes can be missing from games. And sure. I don't mean missing in the fact that he's not there, but it doesn't appear like he's not making an impact on the game, so to speak. So I think a lot of people like the idea of getting a new face in that wide receiver core to kind of just add to that, because the offense is so good, why not make it better? But like you said, it's definitely not the most needed position for the Packers right now. But I think that maybe adding a veteran player to help kind of give a more reliable second option wouldn't be a bad way to go later on in the free agency after the draft.
No, but to conclude, I certainly will be looking for the Packers to draft interior D-line and inside linebacker this year as long as available, rather appropriate talent is available. Now for our final segment of the podcast, we're going to move on to a team that no matter how much the NFC Champ game lost, no matter how much the NFC Champ game feels, how badly that feels to us Packers fans, we're still glad we're not Buffalo Sabres fans. And Tyson, why is that the case?
Oh man, the Buffalo Sabres are so dysfunctional, and it's just terrible. Like, this team was supposed to be good, and that's why they went and they got Taylor Hall in the offseason, and they gave him a 1-year, $8 million contract, and they expected Taylor Hall to play with Jack Eichel or play on that second line with Sam Reinhart, and Jeff Skinner would be playing on that first line.
A lot of name power there, by the way. Like,
right?
If you look a few years back, every single one of those guys is top 6 or better.
Right, and Jeff Skinner, former 30-goal scorer. Taylor Hall, former league MVP. Jack Eichel went right behind Connor McDavid.
And certainly deserving from a talent standpoint. Kyle Okposo used to be a very solid 20, 30 goal, 50, 60 point power forward with a lot of size.
Yes.
Good player, too.
Yeah, all these guys, good players. Jack Eichel's probably going to be the number one center on the Olympic USA hockey team, or at least the number 2 center behind Austin Matthews. And that's probably what Team USA is going to be looking like. So these are high-quality players and highly skilled players, but Kyle Okposo, Jack Eichel, Jeff Skinner, and Taylor Hall this season have combined for a total of 5 goals.
5. Oh, that's kind of like a Ben Simmons 3-point shooting set.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the Buffalo Sabres have played 30 games.
Oh.
And they cost $33 million on the cap. That's almost half.
Which, by the way, again, in the NHL, much less money involved. It's much, much smaller salary caps than something like the NFL, in case you didn't know. But nonetheless, that's a big chunk.
And it was at this point, because they had a couple of injuries and such, like Jack Eichel, he's been out with some injuries, that they had a first line. This was their first line, David. Taylor Hall, Riley Sheahan, and Tage Thompson.
That's kind of interesting in a less than ideal kind of way, because from what I remember, Riley Sheahan's kind of one of those middle 6, bottom 9 two-way forwards, and Tage Thompson, well, let's just say he's not an offensive star.
Let me put it to you this way. Riley Sheahan once played a full season without scoring a goal.
Perfect.
And he is your first line center.
Great.
That is not ideal. So Jack Eichel and Skinner and Hall and Okposo, they haven't been good enough, and Taylor Hall is definitely a part of that. The Buffalo Sabres, they're last in the NHL, and it's not close.
Ugh.
It's not close. They're last in the NHL, and the Ducks are second last, and the Ducks are 8 points ahead.
Sabres are 6-20-4. Not even double-digit wins in 30 games. That is a bit less than ideal.
They have lost 14 games in a row.
Great.
That's really bad.
Sure is.
Their goal differential is -42, which is tied for last in the NHL with the Ottawa Senators. The Buffalo Sabres have won 2 games at home. 2 games at home. This is really bad.
Well, then it begs the question, right? How did we get here?
Yeah, how did things get this bad? And it starts with ownership. And from what I understand in the Buffalo Sabres executive suite, leadership in there is kind of like a chartreuse platypus. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Okay, leadership is apparently not to be found. The owner and CEO of the Buffalo Sabres is Terry Pegula. Made his money in natural gas, bought the Buffalo Sabres, and eventually the Buffalo Bills. He bought the Sabres in 2011. It was Terry Pegula's decision to fire 22 staff in June.
Right when he had this name-heavy roster?
Yes.
Interesting.
They
Not
fi-
in a good way, though.
No, they fired 22 staff because they didn't make the playoffs. This is clearly not the time or place to fire all of your staff, right? When you choose to fire 22 of your staff, you're signaling to the organization it's time to start over.
Sure.
Not that you're on the cusp of winning and making the playoffs, right? So then Terry Pegula decided, okay, we're going to hire Ralph Kruger. Now, Ralph Kruger, he has some experience in the NHL. He was a very successful hockey coach over in Europe. Came over, was an assistant for the Oilers, eventually took over for the Oilers in 2012, 2013, that lockout shortened season. He was the head coach of the Oilers for one season. They came 12th in the West, and they missed the playoffs. So he was promptly fired after that year. Afterwards, Ralph Kruger went on to become the director of Southampton.
A soccer club, or in case of European lingo, football club.
Yes, he was the director of Southampton in the English Premier League. And after his contract expired at Southampton, he was hired to be the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres and was promptly fired after 12 games of losing.
Fantastic.
So they haven't won a game since Kruger was fired. So this is clearly an organization that has a lot of dysfunction from the management perspective. Now, the other owner and president of the organization is Kim Pegula, Terry's wife. Okay.
Sure.
So Kim Pegula, she went to school at Houghton College in New York for sports journalism. Met Terry at a restaurant, kind of started a job, and then a year later they started dating and married. Mostly involved kind of in the marketing aspect of the Buffalo Sabres, because that makes sense, because she went for sports journalism and stuff like that. But there are some really bad blunders in terms of marketing and fan interaction with the Buffalo Sabres in this organization. So for the 50th anniversary of the Buffalo Sabres history, they had two of their legends, Mike Robitaille and Dave Andreychuk. They misspelled their last names on their jersey.
Did they now?
They did.
Yikes.
They're two legends hanging from the rafters, and they could not spell their names on their jersey right.
That's an oof.
That's an oof.
In the eloquent words of internet lingo, that is an oof.
That is an oof. Okay, and then the Buffalo Sabres, they had a 90s night. Now, in this 90s night, there was no representation from the black Big Buffalo jerseys, which was worn for most of the 90s.
Oh.
There was no representation of that, which is kind of confusing.
It is.
And it's one of the most popular fan favorite jerseys of all time. And the Buffalo Sabres just refused to acknowledge that, I guess? It made no sense. Anyways, later on, their alumni, some of the Buffalo Sabres alumni, was doing a charity event. But these players were wearing knockoff jerseys.
Knockoff jerseys?
They were not wearing original jerseys. Players took photos with fans who had the actual jerseys.
Oh my goodness.
And you could clearly see, like, there was, like, lines missing. There were certain patterns and colors that were off. There were things that were missing from the jersey. It was really bad. You had Buffalo Sabres alumni going out and wearing knockoff jerseys for a charity event.
Well, as embarrassing as all of that is, certainly there must also be a player development or player management angle as to why they're in this situation. You know, searching for their 7th head coach in 9 seasons and sitting on a dumpster fire that's only growing bigger.
For sure. Like, the Buffalo Sabres are very thin at staff because Terry Pegula fired 22 staff and didn't hire anybody. So they have 9 members of their hockey operations department, and that's including their heads of scouting. They have 7 total scouts. Only 7. That's not very many. And then you have interim head coach Don Granato, who has 0 coaching experience, or head coaching experience, sorry. Then you have assistant Mike Bales, video coach, and a video coordinator. And then they have 4 developmental coaches. And 2 of them whom are currently interim assistant coaches. And I just want to give you a little bit of a reference here. The Toronto Maple Leafs, they have tons of money, and we all know this. But not including the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment board and CEO and ownership side of things, the Toronto Maple Leafs have 24 executives in the hockey ops. They have 22 scouts. They have 16 developmental staff and coaches, and they have 3 more assistant coaches than the Buffalo Sabres do. I think that when we look at the development side of the players, that there has been a lack of staff that has directly contributed to the lack of development of this team.
That's very... Yeah, for sure. It sounds like they're running a skeleton crew down there, and the way they've drafted certainly hasn't helped either. And for that, I think we have to go back to the 2014 NHL entry draft, which we were talking about this before the broadcast. It's very, very odd in hindsight.
Yeah, when you look at it in hindsight, it's interesting. That was the draft that Aaron Ekblad went number 1 to the Florida Panthers, and then the Buffalo Sabres had pick number 2, and they drafted Sam Reinhart over Leon Draisaitl, who was taken 3rd by the Edmonton Oilers. Now, Sam Reinhart at the time was kind of considered to be this really good leader, really good hockey IQ player, kind of this playmaking center who can really pass the puck with an elite ability. And that's kind of what was advertised. And that's why Sam Reinhart was taken 2nd overall. Now, when we look at Sam Reinhart's career to Leon Draisaitl's, it's not even comparable. Leon Draisaitl is, near the top of the league in scoring every year.
He and McDavid are the new Crosby Malkin, essentially.
Meanwhile, Sam Reinhart has not been able to produce as a second-line center, so he's been moved to the wing, where it's easier for him to contribute and less defensively responsible. But it's not only Sam Reinhart who's been drafted but then not able to be developed to his fullest extent of his potential. Rasmus Dahlin, who just taken a couple of years ago 1st overall, he's regressed. He's a -28 this year. Now, for those of you who don't know what plus-minus stat is, a plus-minus stat is whenever you're on the ice for a goal, that's +1. Whenever you're on the goal or on the ice for a goal against, that's a -1. So Rasmus Dahlin has been on the ice for 28 more goals against than he has been for goals for.
And now plus-minus is obviously a controversial stat by itself because there's a lot of complicated factors that go into whether or not you're on the ice for a goal versus whether or not you're on the ice when your team scores a goal. But I was watching the Calgary Flames game against Toronto last weekend, and I forget who I think it might have been Kevin Bieksa on the panel making the point that sure, plus-minus might be a controversial stat, but when it's that heavily skewed to one side or the other, it is telling.
Yeah, and I think that's important to understand is that, plus-minus isn't a super big stat except when it's a lot. But when we look at their other draft picks, like the Buffalo Sabres have drafted top 8 every year for 8 years in a row. They've drafted, Casey Middlestat, who in 2018 was the World Juniors MVP, top forward, leading point scorer, bronze medalist for the Team USA. But Casey Middlestat is barely able to make the 4th line for the Buffalo Sabres, and they won't even try and play him in the top 6. Alex Nylander, like his brother William playing in Toronto, is highly skilled offensively, but Alex Nylander wasn't developed well, and he was traded to Chicago. So there's a severe problem in this organization with developing young talent, and the answer simply cannot just be, we're just going to get better through the draft, because it's proven that the Buffalo Sabres don't take their draft picks and develop them into NHL players.
Well, as true as that might be, at least you weren't the team that drafted Sam Bennett 4th overall. Okay, we're going to move on from that point because you know what? These oddities do happen, and sometimes players just fail to pan out. And while we're on the topic of visiting the 2014 draft, 50-goal threat David Pastrnak falling to 25 will never not be strange.
No, that's a tough one.
Boston lucked out.
Oh, man, that's a tough one for me as a Leafs fan to swallow, because if Pastrnak was on any other team, I would love him, but because he's on the Boston Bruins and he scores against my Leafs so often, I can't love him.
Sure, fair enough. But in any case, I suppose we're going to have to see what happens to the Buffalo Sabres from this point out. This, we hope for their sake, is rock bottom, but this is a puzzle that is going to require some serious effort to solve.
I think the first step is for the owner, Terry Pegula, to realize that since he's owned the team in 2011, the team has not been in good shape. They haven't made the playoffs. So I think it's time for Terry Pegula to step back and hire a president of hockey operations to kind of run the team, so to speak. And I think that would be the best place to start, is getting somebody who has a lot of experience to help facilitate this rebuild and help out general manager Kevin Adams.
Because the writing is absolutely on the wall that you've got to tear down the whole thing and start over, because what you are doing simply is not working. And once again, we wish them the best of luck in doing that. But until then, unfortunately, it looks like Sabres fans are going to have to put up with some misery for a while longer. But
hopefully there's some hope coming into the future.
But anyways, that will do it for our episode here today. Once again, folks, we hope you enjoyed listening. We hope you're enjoying March Madness and all the other crazy things that are happening in sports these days. And we'll see you next time on the Draft Board.